This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Welcome to another episode of Kal's Corner here on the X-Zone Broadcast Radio Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. And the legendary Rob McConnell is the executive producer of this show. I don't produce it, but that's okay. He does it, and he does a much better job than I could ever do. So here on Kal's Corner, as we've talked about from day one, the show owes its origins to Rob McConnell in the 1990s when we used to do it as part of the X-Zone radio show series. It was a segment on X-Zone radio. Kal's Corner covers everything from politics to the paranormal. So tonight's show is not going to focus only on the paranormal. Not only do I need a break from it, but there's other things going on that are actually much more important. So let's get into it, and we'll switch between politics and the paranormal throughout the show, because again, we cover the entire spectrum here, and no subject is off limits on Kal's Corner. Okay, let's talk about what's going on in the United States. As a lot of people know, the United States is going through a terrible hurricane. Hurricane Harvey is a Category 4 hurricane, and it has yet to peak. That means it's going to get worse over the next few days. Cities like Houston are flooded. The damage is devastating. And predictably, you have global warming nuts, and I use the term nuts because they're not thinking critically, and that's always bad regardless of the subject, using and abusing the data about the existence of Hurricane Harvey as evidence that, well, global warming and climate change are out of control and we need to do something. And because there's this big hurricane, this is more evidence of global warming. Folks, don't fall for that nonsense. In fact, it is disgraceful and disgusting that the New York Times ran with an op-ed piece that basically argues this is predictable, this is what's happened because of climate change. And it all dates back to a lie. It is literally a lie that Al Gore made years ago when he was doing his movie An Inconvenient Truth. If you look at the movie poster for that film, you see a smokestack. And coming out of that smokestack is a hurricane. And what Al Gore did, because he's Al Gore, is he made a point to tell the media one set of so-called facts, while making sure to tell the international press another set entirely. What he did was this. He refused to say that hurricanes were caused by climate change. He didn't ever dare make that claim to the American media. He didn't make it because it's not true. There is no scientist who is credible who will say that hurricanes are caused by global warming. There's no connection. And by the way, tornadoes are not either, all right? But to the British press, and we have to remember that the whole climate change movement owes its origins to then British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher, who had a degree in chemistry. She was the only world leader at the time who actually had a degree. She's the one who championed this issue because her advisors said that if you run with it, nobody can argue with you since they don't have any major in science, and you'll be able to carve a niche for yourself in addition to being the world's first female British Prime Minister. So that's exactly what Margaret Thatcher did, and under her government, this whole climate change movement took off with official money, taxpayer money, being used to give it fuel and credibility even where it did not exist. So what happened was Al Gore, and you can Google this, it may take a few screens to find the exact articles, you can catch him saying that climate change is caused, or hurricanes are caused by global warming. And he's warning the world that these hurricanes are going to get worse and more frequent in number. And he was saying this nonsense after the Katrina hurricane, which happened during President Bush's administration. Well, fast forward now to the present. It's been many years, 2 terms of Barack Obama and now the term of Donald Trump. And you'll see that there was no major hurricane that hit the U.S. for over 140 months. That's a fact. This is the first one, folks. So if climate change is causing hurricanes, and we have record amounts of carbon and greenhouse gases in the atmosphere, how come there aren't hurricanes every week? Why do we go years, almost 10 years, with none? Well, that's because there is no connection. So, a shame on the New York Times and others who are running with this and exploiting this terrible tragedy to serve a larger agenda. I'm not saying that we shouldn't help the environment. I absolutely believe in that. But I don't need a thermometer to tell me that we shouldn't pollute. It's common sense and it's logic, okay? But what I do object to is when people twist science to further an agenda, regardless of what that agenda is. Shame on anyone who tries to do it. It doesn't matter what the subject is. In this case, it's climate change. And one last comment. Where it concerns the so-called Paris Accord, as I have reported on it over the years, it is useless basically because it's not going to make a difference. The cuts don't go far enough, and if something doesn't solve a problem, it isn't solved. I'm Kal Korff. We'll be back with segment 2 of Kal's Corner here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
I am Dr. Carl O. Harvey, founder, president of a new cancer foundation focusing on evidence-based physical, mental, and spiritual interventions, including natural cancer cures, prayer, meditation, affirmations, nutrition, and other related holistic cancer prevention and cure modalities. These are used in cancer education, research, and financing care. I ask for your help to continue this important work by donating at www.holisticcancerfoundation.com.
Is it science or is it magic? Once a magical thing has been scientifically proven, is it no longer magic? Or is magic simply the science of tomorrow? Join me, Gwilda Wiyaka, on The Science of Magic, a a syndicated radio program dedicated to combining the science and magic of today's dynamic and controversial topics to co-create new solutions. By triangulating information from today's leading experts from the scientific and magical fields, we uncover expansive and evolutionary truths you won't find anywhere else. Join us daily on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net, as I interview the share thoughts with the amazing guests from both science and magic. The resulting knowledge is unprecedented. As a gift to you, the listener, past episodes can be accessed on our website free of charge at thescienceofmagic.net.
Little children aren't the only ones afraid of the dark. Millions of soldiers return from war zones with PTSD, anger, frustration, fear, and loneliness, much of which surfaces during the darkness of the night. You have the chance to change the lives of these American heroes. Songs and Stories for Soldiers.us provides free MP3 players for these men and women. With a list of 3 million songs in 16 different styles, 100,000 audiobooks, and 30,000 old-time radio programs, every veteran can find something to soothe and comfort them at no cost. All our players contain an 8-hour audio program designed to help veterans fall asleep. With 1,500 plus vets now participating, it's our goal to deliver 10,000 audio players this year. Go to our website at songsandstoriesforsoldiers.us. Help us help a veteran make it through the night.
Welcome to segment 2 here on Kal's Corner. Good evening, wherever you are listening to this. As we were just saying in the first segment, we were discussing briefly the tragedy of the current hurricane Harvey that is pelting the United States, and how the New York Times and other left-wing liberal media who have an agenda to push are going ahead and misusing the existence of this hurricane and falsely claiming that this was predictable and that this is the result or consequence of global warming, which again is pure nonsense. And we can thank people like Al Gore, who have used tactics in the past of basically lying to further the agenda. In other words, they seem to believe in the idea that the ends justify the means, which of course should never be the case. Now, this isn't the only false claim that Al Gore has made over the years. You may remember that he famously predicted years ago that by the year 2014, the North Pole would be completely melted. He said that there would be a generation of kids who would never know what snow was. Well, the Earth never got the memo. There's more snow now in the North Pole than there has been. And you have other mythical claims like those supposedly stranded polar bears that were stranded on pieces of floating ice in the Arctic. Well, you can talk to the photographer who took those photos. It turns out they weren't stranded at all. That was just a blatant lie that was put in there to promote the movie. And you don't have to take my word for it. In fact, I'd encourage you not to. Just simply Google lies, errors, or mistakes in Al Gore's film An Inconvenient Truth, and you'll find dozens of them. And yet this guy won the Nobel Peace Prize. And one of the people who was nominated that year to receive the Nobel Peace Prize was a very humble woman who saved dozens of Jews from the Nazi Holocaust. She didn't win. Al Gore did. And he didn't even tell the truth. So that's how depraved the Nobel Peace Prize process has become. Probably the most famous recent example of what I think is a ridiculous awarding of the Nobel Peace Prize to anybody. Doesn't matter who it is, but in this case, it happened to be Barack Obama. Remember, he got a Nobel Peace Prize shortly after he became president of the United States. My reaction as a journalist and a fellow American is, what did he do to earn the prize? Nothing. He got elected. Okay. Well, do we give everyone who gets elected a Nobel Peace Prize? No, because then it means the prize doesn't mean anything. It waters it down. It takes away the so-called value of it. But he got a prize just because he got elected. He didn't really do anything. And this is why I don't take the prize very seriously anymore, because if you look at some of the humdinger winners, like Al Gore, like Barack Obama, I'm sorry, the whole idea of the prize is that you should really have done something to earn it. Duh, hello. And in my opinion, neither of these two individuals, especially Barack Obama, he didn't even do a movie about the environment. Now, I want to explain again something about global warming before we switch to a different subject. Society has become so polarized today that if you disagree with somebody, they automatically get angry and upset and they accuse you of all kinds of things which aren't even true. And I know this because I'm often the recipient of such venom directly from people. For example, I remember years ago when I was doing this segment on the X Zone radio show in Prague, I was telling people that Barack Obama was not going to keep all of his promises and that a lot of this was really chump change, not real change that we could believe in. And I said that I'm not going to vote for him. Immediately I got attacked and people said, oh, it must be because you're a neocon conservative, a Republican, or you must be supporting John McCain. The truth was I supported neither. Because ever since the late 1990s, and people who know me know this is true, people who criticize me ignore this fact, I have said ever since near the end of Bill Clinton's second term in office, so we're talking about the late 1990s, that both political parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, have failed the American people. America is over 240 years old, and yet it has only two political parties. Now, I argue, and I have again since the 1990s, that whenever you have a country that is a democracy, that is that old, and it has only two political parties to show for it, that is not a living, breathing, dynamic political system. It is instead a polarized, fossilized, creaky system that doesn't work anymore. And it doesn't matter who the parties are, what they stand for. It doesn't matter what country it is. I'm talking about the overall universal principle here. Now, I admit that I prefer the American political system over, say, what Europe has. I'm not a fan of parliamentary democracy. I believe in one man, one vote, and that you should vote directly for the individual. I have never been myself a my party, right or wrong type person. I always have supported candidates on an individual basis, on an issue by issue basis, and that is why convenient slogans and stereotyping or trying to put me into a single box doesn't work. I agreed with Obama on some things, disagreed with him on many others. I agree with Trump on some things. I disagree with him on most things. So again, I take each individual issue on its own merits or lack of, as well as the individual candidate. I don't care what party they belong to. I care about what they stand for and whether they're able to do the job that voters elect them to get done. That's what matters to me. So what had happened is during this campaign for Barack Obama versus John McCain, of course, America was under severe financial crisis. It wasn't just the United States, it was much of the world. And I remember being in Germany one time in the beautiful city of Dresden. And I went into Deutsche Bank, which is, of course, the German bank, largest bank in Germany. And I was trying to exchange some Czech koruna into German euros so that I could go ahead and get some visa paperwork done. And what happened is, as I was in the bank, they gave me some coffee, and I was talking to one of the managers there, and the financial crisis had hit. And he was saying, yeah, we should really thank you Americans for lying to us about the mortgage bubble because we believed you. We thought you had told us the truth. And I had no idea what he was talking about. And then I found out that Deutsche Bank had bought a lot of these bad mortgages that had been sold to them by financial institutions in the United States who knew these were bad mortgages. They lied to the Germans. The Germans believed they were being told the truth, that it would be a good, solid investment, so they snatched them up. And when the whole house of cards came tumbling down, the Germans, of course, were one of many, many victims, millions of them around the world. So it turns out that part of the rescue package, and you can look this up, that Barack Obama passed, and he should be commended for that. It was actually a bipartisan effort, let's be honest, was to refund essentially the Germany's money, or at least recoup some of their losses. And that's only right and fair because they were lied to, and that should never have happened. So what did happen during this campaign is one of my best friends named Bill Marriott. He was extremely pro Barack Obama, and I was not. And it caused some friction between us, which was rather interesting because although we were best friends and worked together at Apple and Claris and some other places, politics had never been something he was into, but he was really a hardcore Obama supporter. So because he had set up my first website, kalkorff.com, and I got onto the web reluctantly at his urging. It wasn't my idea. I'm not going to claim credit for it. And he got me into social media and Skype and all this other stuff. And I had a love-hate relationship with social media back then, which I don't have anymore, thankfully. One day he tells me that that I'm going to have to move my website because he's tired of me bashing Barack Obama. And I had to laugh at that because I told him, I said, Bill, we may disagree, but if what I'm saying is true, why should it bother you? And if it's my website, why should it bother you? Well, he was one of these rehosters, if you will, through GoDaddy, and it was on that site at the time. It still is on GoDaddy, kalkorff.com. And what happened is Barack Obama came to Prague, where I lived, and Bill was visiting. And at Bill's urging, he said, let's go see him. So we went and saw Barack Obama. We were two of thousands of people that day who had come to see Barack Obama. We actually stayed all night at the castle and hung out with these hardcore followers. And it was interesting talking to them because they were really caught up, almost all of them, in the fact that they had played a part in electing the first black president. And when they found out that I wasn't a fan of Barack Obama and that I didn't vote for him, they immediately assumed, I must have voted for John McCain. I didn't vote for McCain either. And the idea that I wouldn't vote for one or the other shocked them. And then they said to me, didn't you want to be part of electing the first black president? And I said, no. I said, I don't care what color his skin is. That's genetics. Any other claim is racism. And I'm not going to elect somebody based on the color of their skin. And I'd ask them, I'd say, do you think it's right to elect somebody just because they're white or Asian or Chinese or Indian or Czech? And they'd say, no. Oh, you say no, but you did it where it concerns Barack Obama. And they didn't say anything because what could they say? They were hypocrites. They were exposed. They were busted. So what I saw for the first time in my short life was that the Obama supporters started accusing you of being a racist if you dared to criticize this new black president. And that's just ridiculous. And I see the same pattern today with Trump supporters. If you support Trump, you are a white supremacist. You're a neo-Nazi. Well, I got news for people who hold such stupid views, and they are stupid. Most of the people who voted for Donald Trump are not racists. There is no evidence that they are, because it isn't true. Again, I repeat, most, keyword most, and we're talking by far the majority of people who voted for Donald Trump are not racists. They're just typical Americans. And you have to remember that Hillary Clinton, regardless of what you think about her, entered the race with the highest distrustful rating of all candidates. It was around 70%. And she exited the race with about the same untrustworthy rating. And that takes special talent. So if the Democratic Party had been smart instead of stupid, they would never have put her up and jumped into bed with their corruption, anointing Queen Hillary as their candidate. Instead, they would have chosen Bernie Sanders and backed him because polls consistently showed that Bernie Sanders was the only candidate that, if he had gone head-to-head with Trump, would have beat him. And can you imagine what a debate would have been like between Sanders and Trump? It would have been a very scholarly Sanders versus a clueless Donald Trump. Instead, we had this circus that was the Hillary Clinton show and the Donald Trump show. And of course, you may remember the famous second debate where the women that Bill Clinton was accused of sexually harassing or attacking, one woman claimed she had been raped by him. And then, of course, you had Donald Trump's disgraceful remarks about the anatomy of women and grabbing them there. This was the type of thing that just should never have happened in American politics, but it did. And, the rest is history. Okay, we'll be back for segment 3 of Cal's Corner after the break.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
How would you like to be able to read other people's minds? Well, the next best thing is here. When you know how to read a person's name, you know how the person thinks, feels, and behaves. Each letter in our name holds a key to unlock our true essence. Our name contains both our gifts and challenges in this lifetime. Mnemology science discovers personality secrets hidden in the placement of the letters of our names, including the first and last impression people remember about us. Sharon shows us how to interpret the arrangement of letters as outlined in her book, Know the Name, Know the Person. Sharon Lynn Wyeth created mnemology science after 18 years of research and testing her theories, and has supported thousands of people around the world in understanding themselves and others better. You'll enjoy Sharon's unique teachings as she shares her system to learn the gifts behind your given birth name. Even if you don't like your birth name, there are jewels in this book. If you're thinking of changing your name, ready to name your child, or wanting to get along better with others, this is the book for you. If you'd like to improve your relationships and change your life for the better, get the book today, Know the Name, Know the Person, or visit www.knowthename.com. That's www.knowthename.com.
Hello, I'm Justina Marsh, and with my dad Pete, we are going to present a new show called Too Good to Be True. Together, we are aiming to discover more truths about this world and beyond. Do you have unanswered questions about the world? Do you ever wonder about aliens, conspiracy theories, or the universe? There are many shows discussing subjects such as pyramids or UFOs, but we want to relay this information based on our own research, including from spiritual means. Hopefully, listeners will be helped with their own beliefs and will appreciate the psychic insights that add to the previous research and information. We both look forward to sharing this insight and beginning this journey with our listeners. Visit xzbn.net for more information about when to listen.
Ancient prophecies, legends, and current events indicate we're entering a high-frequency era supporting enlightenment. During expansive times, old rules fail, necessitating access to the ever-shifting currents of life for guidance. There's an ancient form of shamanism through which we can obtain the information we need. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Art School, with a great new provision for those interested in spiritual evolution and personal empowerment. Galactic Shamanism, Art of the Ancients, Key to Tomorrow, is an upcoming series of leading-edge online affordable classes designed to guide and support you and your family during these times of transition. Embrace the magic. Empower your life. Study Galactic Shamanism at findyourpathhome.com.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Welcome back to segment 3 of Kal's Corner here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. Once again, the executive producer of the show is the legendary Rob McConnell. So we're talking about Donald Trump and the campaign, and Barack Obama and John McCain and Bill Clinton, Hillary Clinton. Let's wrap up some of this and go to a different subject. Before we do that, let's talk about Donald Trump. Now, in the United States, if you follow the media reports, and that's the key here, folks, you'll see that the big story, understandably, is the hurricane. It should be. It's the number one story out there, at least where it concerns America. Then there is a second story about Donald Trump pardoning Sheriff Joe and what that means. Let's talk about that for a few minutes. As Donald Trump indicated weeks ago, he was leaning towards pardoning Sheriff Joe, who was prosecuted by the Obama Department of Justice and then Attorney General Eric Holder for violating the constitutional rights of inmates. The list of allegations against Sheriff Joe are quite long, actually, and there may be some truth to them. I'm not trying to run away or duck from the issue, but since the conviction was recent and the appeals process never ran its course because there has been a pardon now, so it's irrelevant, one of the things that Sheriff Joe did, which was wrong and should never be condoned, is he was a big believer in so-called racial profiling, meaning if you looked Hispanic and you looked, whatever that means, that you might be in the country illegally, he had no problem going ahead and stopping you and asking for your ID. And in the United States, the courts have consistently ruled that stopping somebody just to ask them for their ID is wrong. So I remember in Europe one time, I was in a KFC. I was eating and using the Wi-Fi, and the Czech police came in. And sitting next to me was a man who was from Africa. He was dressed nicely in a suit, a very dark-skinned individual, and he had a metal suitcase with him. He was sitting next to me at the next table, minding his own business. The Czech police came up. I thought they were going to ask me something. They looked at me, then they looked at him. They walked past me, and then asked him for his passport. He showed it to them. Then they shook their head. Then they took him away. They had arrested him. Apparently, he was in the country illegally. And I remember that incident because I remember thinking, wow, what if I had been black or Chinese or something? Would they have done that to me? Apparently, based on what I saw and what I've seen that goes on in the Czech Republic, the answer is yes. But instead, I'm white. I could blend in. Plus, I'm American. They tend to treat Americans very well over there. And so the whole thing really left me in a bit of a foul mood because I thought it was wrong to single out individuals based on how they look because they might be whatever. You know, it's one thing to have a suspicion or to have what's called probable cause, but to say, let's search him because he's black or let's search him because he's Chinese, that is wrong on principle and it will never be right. And yet Sheriff Joe would do this and he'd get in trouble. So he got in trouble and he got essentially indicted by the Justice Department. And what happened is Trump has pardoned him. Now, when the pardon went down, the anti-Trump media went ballistic, of course, because they're always looking for the latest excuse to take it to Donald Trump. And of course, Trump's action gave them ammunition to do this, but Trump doesn't seem to care. So I weighed in on social media on this issue, saying that the reaction by the anti-Trump media, and again the New York Times, was exaggerated, because to say that this was unprecedented, it's not quite that simple. So what I reminded people who hate Donald Trump and thought that this was the worst thing that anybody could ever do was that, hey, don't you remember when President Gerald Ford pardoned President Richard Nixon? Sheriff Joe was not a politician. He didn't run for office. He wasn't president. I argue that Ford's pardoning of Nixon was a much bigger deal. But you would never know that based on the reaction that was kicked back in my face, that I'm wrong and that, no, what Trump did was far worse. And I'm thinking, get a clue. Don't you understand history? And then I brought up another issue, which I find amusing in a rather interesting way, in that it proves the hypocrisy of Trump haters, and especially Clinton supporters. I brought up the issue that Bill Clinton had pardoned the financial criminal Mark Rich, and that he did it on the last day in office, hours before his presidential term expired, and that he didn't run it through the normal Department of Justice queue to have their input to go ahead and decide whether to pardon Rich or not. Because that was one of the criticisms of Donald Trump pardoning Sheriff Joe, is that he didn't run it through the DOJ either. And that's not really true. He actually did involve the DOJ, but Trump had made up his mind he's going to do it, and by law he can. And he did. So, bringing up Mark Rich is a sore subject with Clinton supporters. And I would encourage anybody who has the unfortunate fate of being stuck having to talk to a Clinton supporter. I'm talking about a blind Clinton supporter, not somebody who just genuinely doesn't know. Bring up the issue of Mark Rich. You'll find that it'll lead to quite an amusing conversation and show that they're hypocrites. And let me easily prove it. Mark Rich was a multi-billionaire who opened a commodities company. And he would jump into bed with anybody. It didn't matter who it was. So what he did is he helped Saddam Hussein sell oil on the black market. And this is while Saddam Hussein is under sanctions. He was such a traitor to the United States that what he did when 53 Americans were being held hostage by the Iranian regime after Ayatollah Khamenei took over, he continued to sell on the black market oil to Iran. And yet he was an American citizen. So here he is betraying his country, pursuing making the almighty dollar. He helped Slobodan Milosevic, the brutal genocidal dictator. He was in bed with Ferdinand Marcos, the brutal Philippine dictator. Mark Rich's history of helping very questionable individuals, tyrants around the world, is undisputed. And yet, Clinton pardoned him. And, not coincidentally, Hillary Clinton received over $100,000 from Mark Rich's ex-wife as a donation for her Senate campaign. And what's ironic is that she was running for senator against Mayor Rudy Giuliani. And he had to withdraw from that race because he had developed cancer. Well, it was Giuliani who worked with former FBI Director Comey to try to prosecute Mark Rich. In fact, Rich was indicted with dozens of counts of wire fraud, mail fraud, racketeering, money laundering, and he fled the United States. And he hid out with his partner for years in Switzerland, renounced his citizenship, although the State Department didn't accept it, and then cut a deal with prosecutors and with his pardon so that he could essentially come back and get away with the crimes that he had gotten away with, ripping off people and investors for hundreds of millions of dollars. Now, I argue that as bad as Sheriff Joe may be or have acted or have violated the constitutional rights of an inmate, racial profiling him or whatever, using stun guns, whatever it is, I argue that those offenses, as bad as they are, and they're not to be condoned, are nowhere near on the scale of what Mark Rich did. And yet, it's okay in the eyes of Clinton supporters that Mark Rich was pardoned, but it's not okay that Donald Trump pardoned Sheriff Joe. So this is undeniable evidence, in my opinion, about the hypocrisy that the Clinton camp has. And it gets even worse, and I'll tell you why. One of the people that helped arrange the pardon for Mark Rich was John Podesta. And who is John Podesta? Clinton's campaign manager. Another lawyer who worked to pardon Mark Rich was Scooter Libby. He was pardoned by Dick Cheney. So, again, you have the same cast of characters involved in an act that should never have happened. Rich should never have been pardoned. And who was the attorney who pushed for Mark Rich's pardon? Eric Holder, Mr. Justice. So you can appreciate the irony here. You've got James Comey, you've got Scooter Libby, you've got Podesta, you've got, again, Eric Holder, you've got Mark Rich, you've got Bill Clinton. The Clinton Foundation and Presidential Library gets hundreds of thousands of dollars in donations from Rich's wife. She personally pitches to Bill Clinton to pardon her ex-husband. And then, of course, Hillary Clinton gets over $100,000 in a donation to run for Senate against Giuliani, who was one of the people who had Rich indicted. You couldn't make this up if you were in Hollywood. And yet it's all true. And believe me, it's just the tip of the iceberg. So I find it, again, amusing and hypocritical that the left-wing la-la pro-Clinton media, who hates Donald Trump by that very inherent dynamic, is all up in arms over what he did over Sheriff Joe, saying it's unprecedented, he should be impeached, when it was Bill Clinton who was way over the top in this area. Trump doesn't hold a candle compared to Clinton on the pardoning front. And we must remember that another individual that Clinton pardoned was his cocaine-dealing brother, Roger, who served time in prison for dealing drugs. Now, how many presidents have pardoned their criminal drug-dealing brother? One, Bill Clinton. And yet you don't hear anything about that. Again, it's hypocrisy. Please don't fall for it. But yet if you look at the la-la liberal media, this is CNN, this is, again, the New York Times, the usual clowns, you will see again that they just love to pick and choose their facts and realities in history while ignoring the truth. And yet what they try to sell you and broadcast to you is what they claim is the truth. It's really propaganda designed to push an agenda, and that agenda is to destroy the Trump presidency, to delegitimize it wherever they can, to use the same tactics that, to be blunt, the Republicans used against Barack Obama. Remember, they had the nickname the Party of No, because no matter what Obama did, even when he was right, the Republicans would try to destroy it. Well, now the exact opposite is happening. We'll be back again for the next segment of Cal's Corner after this station break.
The Earth is under ever-increasing pressure from untenable lifestyles and growing populations. Yet, viable answers seem in short supply. What if I told you there's an ancient form that can empower you to take charge of your life? What if your entire family could be enfolded and supported by life itself, finding safe passage through challenging times. I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, founder and director of Path Home Shamanic Art School, with great news: an upcoming series of leading-edge online affordable classes based in an ancient form of shamanism, easily learned and used by your entire family. Galactic Shamanism, Art of the Ancients, Key to Tomorrow are a series of online adult and children's lessons instructing your entire family on natural law, how to cooperate with and be supported by the powers of the universe. Visit findyourpathhome.com to find these unique and powerful classes.
This is the X-Zone Broadcast Network, broadcasting worldwide on broadcast affiliates and satellite program providers, including CNN Broadcast Network, Sirius Satellite Network, Star Media, Good News Radio Network, Angel Broadcast Network, Wiki Broadcast Network, and WPBN TV. For more information on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, visit us at www.xzbn.net.
Did you know that when you're on the road with limited data or Wi-Fi, you can still listen to the X-Zone Radio Show with Rob McConnell, The Science of Magic with Gwilda Wiyaka, X-1, Dimension X, Space Patrol, and every minute of the X-Zone Broadcast Network by calling 213-401-0080, courtesy of Audio Now. No smartphone, app, or internet needed. It saves your data plan, and it's free if you have unlimited minutes. Call 213-401-0080 to listen on any phone, anytime, anywhere. Remember, 213-401-0080 for the best of the paranormal, parapsychology, and sci-fi radio programming anywhere, 24/7, 365.
Are you curious? Do you want to learn more about how the world works and have fun at the same time? Study coincidences with me, Dr. Bernie Beitman, MD, on my Connecting with Coincidence radio show, here on the XZBN network. Listen to Jungians theorize, statisticians randomize, true believers evangelize, while I categorize. I dance to the rhythm of coincidences. People who experience me see more of them. Maybe something on the show matches a thought in your mind. Let us know. Expand your mind to the weirdness happening around you. Synchronicity spoken here, there, and everywhere. For more information, put Connecting with Coincidence in your search engine and find my website, my social media sites, and my blog.
What is truth? Historically, we viewed things as either being true or false. Now, as we enter a more expansive era, we find the question is not, is it true, but rather, how true is it? I'm Gwilda Wiyaka, host of The Science of Magic Radio, a syndicated, internationally broadcast radio program dedicated to uncovering this ever-expanding truth. Join me daily on the X-Zone Broadcast Network, xzbn.net, as I interview today's leading experts from the fields of science and magic to uncover the hidden truth between the lines drawn in the sand. What we unearth in our discussions is not only amazing, but totally unprecedented. You won't want to miss a single episode. In service to our listeners, past episodes can always be found on our website with our compliments at thescienceofmagic.net.
Welcome to the fourth and final segment of Kal's Corner here on the X-Zone Broadcast Network. My name is Kal Korff, and I'm your host. So, tonight we've talked about Donald Trump, we've talked about Hurricane Harvey, we've talked about Bill Clinton, we've talked about James Comey, we've talked about Eric Holder, we've talked about Scooter Libby, we've talked about Mr. Podesta, we've talked about, again, both Clintons. So, we've talked about Sheriff Joe. So again, on Kal's Corner, we cover everything from politics to the paranormal. So now we've got our politics out of the way, let's talk about the paranormal real quickly. As we saw in last week's broadcast, I launched a book called The Secret FBI Cattle Mutilation Files. To briefly recap, what the book is about is it contains the formerly secret FBI cattle mutilation files, plus it contains key excerpts from a detailed report that was done by a longtime veteran FBI agent named Kenneth Rommel, who actually led an investigation which went on for 1 year that most people have never heard of. And unlike many researchers who try to promote or hype the cattle mutilation cases, implying that there's something mysterious about them or that there was surgical precision operations done to remove the organs of these animals, that aliens are involved, that lasers were used, these other exaggerated claims, they're all destroyed in the Rommel report, which is why it's included in the book. Now, the reason I did the book, I was very aware that the subject of cattle mutilations is a very vertical interest, meaning most people don't care about the subject. It's considered passé. However, the influence of the subject on American culture has been enormous. Thanks to exploitive TV series like The X-Files, the idea of cattle mutilations being caused by aliens has now infected, not for the better, for the worse, I argue, American mainstream culture. In fact, I find it rather disgusting and shameful that every year in the city of Roswell, on July 4th, the day that we should be celebrating our great country's independence and Declaration of Independence from the colonial rule of Great Britain at that time, they're not celebrating that on July 4th. They're celebrating the mythical Roswell UFO crash of 1947, which never happened. In fact, the entire date of July 4th was just made up by people. They might as well have picked December 25th. They can go offend Christians by using the, Christmas date. So, because Roswell never happened, there was no crash of an alien spacecraft. Only in America can you have a city like Roswell hold a parade and celebrate an event that never happened. They might as well have National Unicorn Day, National Elvis Sighting Day. Name your myth, they might as well go for it. Now, I can say this with authority because for better or worse, I am the author of the best-selling Roswell expose of all time. It's an expose book called The Roswell UFO Crash, What They Don't Want You to Know. And the they in the title is not the government, it's not the CIA, it's not the mythical MJ-12 committee. It is instead UFO researchers who have an agenda, just like Trump haters have an agenda, and global warming nuts have an agenda, and pro-Obama types have an agenda, and right-wingers have an agenda. Everybody seems to have an agenda nowadays. The they refers to them. The book exposes many UFO researchers and their false claims. In fact, when the book came out, there was an advertising campaign that said Einstein was right, E equals MC22. And what that was is it was a spoof on Einstein's famous equation, E equals MC squared, because my book exposed the false claims of 22 of the most popular Roswell books on the market. It was the first one to expose the claims of Philip Corso, for example, who wrote the book The Day After Roswell. So, having worked on this new round of releases of what are dozens of books in the pipeline, I decided to release the Cattle Mutilations book first because I thought, well, with today's digital technology, everybody has smartphones, they've got the internet, tools that UFO and paranormal researchers and law enforcement and scientists didn't have until fairly recently. I thought it was time to go back to the 70s when these mutilations were investigated competently by the FBI and by working with New Mexico law enforcement, and go back to the original data and expose how things went wrong. In other words, having been in the UFO field for decades, I remember the old school days that if you wanted to do research, you didn't sit at a computer. You didn't even have a computer. you had a typewriter. But you could go to an archive, you could go to a library, you had to do things the old-fashioned way. That need back then was the way you got it done. That's no longer true today. There's much more powerful tools available, like the internet and computers and smartphones, and everybody uses them, and they also misuse them, which is very disturbing. So I thought, well, if we're going to do a course correction in history here, we've got to go back in time to the good old days and set the record straight so that people understand, especially the younger generation, how things got off course and why people don't think critically, why they accept blindly the idea that aliens are mutilating cattle. It's because of the mythology that was created back then, decades ago, that TV series like X-Files later exploited, as well as the media. And in the media, I cite a typical article written by a journalist in a major newspaper and show how this journalist repeats the falsehoods that are kind of taken for granted nowadays. If you look at articles about cattle mutilations, it's quite common in all the major publications to see journalists use sloppy terminology like their organs removed with surgical precision. Well, that's a dangerous statement to make, because unless you forensically analyze a carcass under a microscope and do the right scientific tests, you can't say there was surgical precision when you've never done any tests to prove it one way or another. It's common sense, if nothing else, but common sense nowadays seems to be a rare commodity. So this is why I chose this book to be the first one to come out. And it is one of dozens that are coming out. The next one due out in the next few days is an expose of Deepak Chopra. Deepak Chopra has made countless millions of dollars mixing New Age terminology with scientific verbiage, fusing the two together to come up with a bunch of gobbledygook, which makes people feel good, spend money, to him, of course, and then he laughs all the way to the bank. This book, The Wisdom of Deepak Chopra, is not an expose of him and his phony claims. That's been done by other people. You can easily Google that on the internet. Instead, I decided to take a very different approach, and that was to use a computer-generated algorithm that would take his words from his own Twitter page and randomly mix them up, and out would come forth sentences that seemed to be fairly identical to what this deep wisdom was that he would sell you for money, of course. So when you randomly string words and terminology together, and it's almost an exact match, as well as an exact match in certain circumstances, to supposedly well-thought deep thinking, that's subjective evidence that such a thing is not going on, and that it's just all gibberish, and that you might want to be a little careful before you blindly accept it. And that was the point of the experiment. So the book contains hundreds of insightful, randomly generated pieces of wisdom from Deepak Chopra's vernacular that he uses, and it proves the point that there's really nothing there. Now, let me give you a quick update real quick on the Hill movie that's coming out in the fall or winter of this year. As you know, I'm broadcasting from the United Arab Emirates. We've done a few shows from here. We finished filming now in Abu Dhabi and Dubai, because in the movie, some of the first scenes take place in these locations. We've been back here 2 times now to do this. This is the last time. All the footage is now done. I can now go back to India, start editing it, and finish scenes with the 2 actresses. The movie stars a woman named Urvashi Tripathi and another woman named Sam Ratan. I'm also in it. It is called The Zeta Reticuli Conspiracy. It does prove, as in solve the Hill UFO case, which is the world's most famous so-called UFO abduction case. It proves that the case is not at all like its proponents have falsely claimed for decades. It also proves that one of the largest proponents of the Hill case knew this data, but ignored it. and it's based on real documents that are decades old, smoking gun documents that prove this. And the Hill case unites these three characters in the movie, and you see them go through it to solve it. And it is a film that I hope appeals to people who are not interested in UFOs. I didn't want to do a dry Discovery Channel type documentary. I wanted to do a more universal story that had wider appeal. And again, the movie is called The Zeta Reticuli Conspiracy. It's still in production, and hopefully will be winding up in about 30 to 45 days. Then it'll go into post-production because there's a lot of special effects in the movie. It's visually very well shot and stunning, if I can say that. And then, of course, it will be out on the market. So that's an update on those projects and what's going on. So thanks for joining me for another episode of Kal's Corner. We'll be back next week with some more exciting stuff. Again, we cover everything from politics to the paranormal. Thanks for joining me.